learn from it. Question?
Can we as citizens have any impact on the rules by which our Senate, our state Senate, and our House of Representatives work? Because they just concentrate so much power into just 4 people.
I think the question is, what can we do about the 4 tops? There are 173 members of the House and Senate, 177 members of the House and Senate, 4 of whom matter, and the other 173 are really rank and file. That might put too fine a point on it, but the 4 tops, and especially now that the Speaker of the House, the Senate President, and the Governor have been of the same political party, it's gotten smaller than that. It's smaller than just the 4 tops. Now there are really only 3 who have immense sway at the end of a session. What you can do is urge your senator in particular, or House member, just show a little self-respect and stand up to leadership. We have had a long process where power has become concentrated in the hands of those 4 officials. The problem, in large part, is campaign finance. The 4 tops, in addition to having more power than anybody else, also raise about as much money as the other 173. And they decide, just those 4 leaders, decide which candidates get money at election time. And every other member of the General Assembly knows if the other party decides to go after them, the typical member of the House and Senate will raise about $100,000 over the course of a 2-year cycle, and for most of them that's plenty. That's enough to run a re-election race on. If the other party decides to go after them, they need $500,000 or $1 million, or depending on what media market they're in and what kind of conditions they're looking at, they need a lot of money fast. And the only way to get that now is to hope that their leader wants to bail them out, thinks they're worth keeping. And so they have to know on every issue that they're voting on, that they have to know what leadership wants from them and on what terms they can disagree. That's a very tight squeeze to put legislators in. So I think changing the way that campaigns are financed, putting limits in so that leadership cannot move $500,000 to one candidate, and to create a public financing option so that candidates, if they do have a falling out with their leader, can know that they can rely on this public financing alternative to stay in office. That will go a long way towards rebuilding that sense of independence, the sense that legislators represent their districts and not their leaders.
I have a question on the public finance aspect, not contribution limits. The reason most states don't have public financing is because there is a potential for the U.S. Supreme Court to declare it unconstitutional based on some previous Supreme Court decisions. Am I correct to assume that you're planning to model the Illinois law after the Connecticut law?
We're looking at the Connecticut law. The issue is how constitutional public financing is. There are clearly ways of doing it that are constitutional. The federal presidential race is the model most people are familiar with, where you qualify for money, you get a block grant, chunk of cash to run your campaign with. That can be a very expensive model, and that's really why most states haven't gone to it, because if you're going to have 118 House seats and 2 or 3 candidates in each district, you can quickly run up a big tab. There are certainly ways of doing it. Most recently, the issue with public financing has been what are called rescue funds or matching grants, where I don't mean to get all wonky on you, but since you asked, the issue has been that the candidates get a first chunk of money, and then if their opponent spends more than that amount of money, they can get what are called rescue funds, or matching, so that they're still competitive with how much their non-participating opponent adds. The problem with that is the U.S. Supreme Court recently ruled in a case out of BICRA, the McCain-Feingold Act, which had what was called a millionaire's amendment, where if your opponent puts more of their own money in, then you get some benefit. In that case, the Supreme Court said that that created a chilling effect on a candidate's spending, and therefore you couldn't chill their spending that way. Now, it's clearly distinguishable between VICRA and public financing, but the principle is kind of troubling. So the thinking now is that the best way to handle this is to let candidates continue to raise very small increments of money and match that going forward. So if you're in a race, you get your initial grant of money and you're satisfied with that, then you can run with that money. If you find yourself in trouble somehow, your opponents are raising money, there's an independent expenditure campaign, there's something else, you can go back out and raise small amounts of money, and that action on your part will trigger a match and therefore more money for you. So there are ways around that, and that's what we're looking at. Connecticut is not a perfect model. You can't simply take Connecticut and drop it into Illinois, but as an inspiration, as something to study and look at, there's a lot to learn there, and I think we can use the Arizona, the Connecticut, the Maine examples to come up with a law that really fits in our context for Illinois.
So that everybody will want you back to learn more, and we really appreciate all you've done. And think of the league, and we thank you so much for being with us today and giving up your Saturday.